Ethan had always believed that success was measured by wealth, power, and status. From a young age, he had chased his ambitions relentlessly, building a business empire that left him among the richest men in the city. He had an eye for opportunity, a mind that worked faster than most, and a drive that never slept. To anyone who looked at him from the outside, he was living the dream. Penthouses with sweeping city views, exotic cars that gleamed under the sun, and invitations to the most exclusive events that most people could only imagine attending. His life was a story of triumph, a constant rise to the top. Yet behind the polished veneer of success, there was an emptiness Ethan couldn't escape. Nights alone in his luxury apartment brought a quiet ache he had long ignored, a sense of something precious lost somewhere along the way. Years earlier, before the fame, fortune, and relentless ambition, he had loved Julia with a depth that now seemed almost forgotten. They met in college, drawn together by an effortless connection. She had a warmth about her, a kind of light that seemed to fill every room she entered, and Ethan had been captivated from the very first moment. Their love had been youthful, intense, and all-consuming. They dreamed of a life full of shared adventures, late-night conversations, and simple joys. They married young, convinced that love would conquer everything, unaware that life had other plans. As Ethan's career began to demand more and more of his time, the balance they once had started to crumble. Business trips, long nights in the office, and the constant pressure to grow his empire left little room for intimacy, for conversation, for the small gestures that had once defined their relationship. Julia tried to reach him, leaving notes, sending texts, and occasionally confronting him with tears in her eyes. She pleaded for connection, for him to remember the life they had envisioned together. But Ethan, wrapped up in spreadsheets, contracts, and the constant hum of ambition, barely noticed. The laughter they had shared faded into silence. Dinners together became rare and tense. The warmth of their early days was replaced by frustration, disappointment, and growing resentment. Julia, a woman of quiet strength and dignity, realized that staying in this marriage would mean sacrificing her happiness, her self-respect, and ultimately her future. One evening, after a particularly lonely birthday, spent entirely alone while Ethan was away on a business meeting, she made the heart-wrenching decision to leave. She packed her belongings with trembling hands, knowing that leaving meant stepping into the unknown, but also that it was the only path toward reclaiming her life. She left not out of anger, but out of a deep, unshakable understanding that love without presence is no love at all. Ethan was devastated. The shock hit him in waves. At first he tried to convince himself it was temporary, that Julia would return once the pressures of life settled. He made frantic calls, left endless messages, and even showed up at her apartment one evening, only to be met with calm but firm resistance. Julia did not need pity. She did not need excuses. She needed recognition, understanding, and a life where she felt valued. Slowly, he realized that nothing he had built, no wealth or influence, could undo the choices she had made. For years after the divorce, Ethan threw himself into his work. He traveled constantly, closing deals, acquiring companies, and adding zeros to his bank account, all while convincing himself that the void left by Julia's departure could be filled with luxury. He rarely allowed himself to think of her, though on quiet nights, memories crept in uninvited. Her laugh in the kitchen, the way she would tilt her head when she was curious, the warmth of her hand in his. All of it haunted him in moments he tried to ignore. Then, one rainy afternoon, walking through the familiar streets of the small downtown area he had once frequented for casual lunches and meetings, he saw her. Julia was behind the counter of a modest café, moving gracefully from table to table. She wore a simple apron over her maternity clothes, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly as she balanced trays, served customers, and handled orders with quiet efficiency. She was visibly pregnant, her hair tied back in a practical bun, her face radiant with determination and strength. Ethan stopped in his tracks, rain soaking his expensive coat, his mind frozen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The woman he had loved, the mother of his child, was working in a small cafe, carrying the weight of both life and responsibility with such courage. The sight pierced him through and through. The empire he had built, the penthouses, the cars, the glamorous lifestyle, all of it seemed meaningless compared to this moment, this glimpse of her reality. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a raw, unfiltered emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades. Guilt, sorrow, longing, admiration, they all collided in a single heartbeat. He realized instantly that nothing in his life mattered more than her, that seeing her here had changed everything. He stood there, hesitant, unsure of how to approach her. The bustling cafe noise faded around him. All he could see was Julia, so strong, so determined, and yet carrying life within her, and all he wanted was to be part of it, to make up for the years lost, if she would even let him. Ethan lingered near the cafe entrance, his heart pounding as he watched Julia move gracefully between tables, greeting customers with a polite smile. Each gesture reminded him of the Julia he had loved, the one who had once lit up every room she entered. She looked stronger, more self-assured, yet there was a quiet vulnerability he couldn't ignore. The subtle way she rested her hand on her belly, the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Julia," he said, his voice trembling slightly despite years of experience speaking in boardrooms and to investors. Julia looked up, startled, and for a moment her eyes widened in recognition. She froze, her hands pausing mid-motion as she processed the sight of him. Ethan had aged, of course, the stress lines around his eyes, the salt and pepper streak in his hair, but he still had the presence she remembered. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. No anger, no accusation, just a quiet calm that spoke volumes. He hesitated, unsure if he should step closer or retreat. The noise of the cafe seemed to vanish as he focused entirely on her. I didn't expect to see you here," he said, trying to keep his tone casual but failing miserably. I wanted to see you to talk, if that's okay." Julia studied him carefully. She had spent years learning to protect her heart, and seeing Ethan again stirred emotions she had long buried. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "We can talk after I finish serving this table." He watched, silently admiring her efficiency and strength. Every move she made seemed purposeful, graceful, and resilient. Ethan felt a surge of guilt. He had missed so much, had been absent during crucial years, and now here she was, carrying his child, facing life on her own, yet handling everything with remarkable composure. Once the table was cleared and the customers thanked her, Julia wiped her hands on a towel and finally faced him fully. The cafe smelled of coffee and pastries, the background chatter a gentle hum around them. Ethan took a hesitant step forward. I know I have no right," he began, his words careful. "But I need to say something. I'm sorry for everything, for being absent, for not noticing, for letting my ambition get in the way of us." Julia's eyes softened slightly. "Ethan, that was years ago," she said gently. "I don't want to dwell on the past. I've had to survive, had to make choices for myself and the baby. I didn't need your pity then, and I don't need it now." Her words struck him deeply. He realized she wasn't looking for his money or charity. She wanted acknowledgement, understanding, and perhaps, slowly, trust. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand," he said. I want to be here now, for you, for our child, not to fix the past, but to help in whatever way I can." Julia paused, studying his face. There was sincerity there, a vulnerability he had never shown before. She had learned to protect herself, but a part of her, the part that had loved him, stirred at the sight of his genuine remorse. "I don't know what that looks like," she admitted, "and I can't promise anything. But maybe we can start small, see what's possible." Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Years of distance and hurt couldn't be undone overnight. But he was willing to try. He wanted to be there, not for appearances or ego, but because he truly cared, because he finally understood what he had almost lost forever. As they stood there, rain softly tapping the windows, a quiet understanding formed between them. They would take it one step at a time. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and old wounds, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Julia. He found himself walking past the cafe more often than necessary, not to intrude, but because he felt a pull he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to understand her world now, to see what life had been like for her in his absence. Finally, he gathered the courage to call her. "Julia, I was wondering if you'd like some help with things," he said carefully, not wanting to overstep. She was quiet for a moment, and Ethan could hear the distant sound of clinking dishes in the background. "I appreciate it," she replied cautiously, "but I manage." He understood her pride. He had seen it all those years ago, but he also knew she deserved support. "I'm not here to take over," he said gently, "just to be there when you need me, whatever that means." After a long pause, she finally agreed. "All right, maybe we can start with something small. I have a few doctor appointments next week. You can come if you want." That small gesture was a breakthrough. Ethan felt a mix of relief and gratitude. He spent the following days preparing, researching, and figuring out how to be present without overwhelming her. He wasn't used to humility, to patience, to quiet acts of care, but he was learning quickly. The day of the first appointment arrived. Julia was nervous, as if opening herself up to him again after all these years required courage. Ethan arrived early, bringing flowers, a small, thoughtful gesture, not grandiose but sincere. Julia's face softened, a hint of a smile breaking through the tension. At the clinic, they sat in the waiting room, surrounded by expectant parents and families. Ethan found himself noticing small details about her: the way she absent-mindedly rubbed her belly, the thoughtful way she scanned pamphlets, the faint tension in her shoulders. He realized he had missed so much, all the milestones, all the quiet moments he had been absent. During the appointment, the doctor smiled warmly at Julia, asking questions about her health and the baby's progress. Ethan listened attentively, making mental notes, asking questions when appropriate, showing genuine concern. Julia noticed, and a quiet respect began to build. She realized he wasn't just showing up for appearances, he was truly invested. Afterward, as they walked back to the cafe, Julia said softly, "You've changed." Ethan nodded. "I've learned a lot. About life, about priorities, about what really matters." She looked at him, eyes thoughtful. "I hope so, because it's not just about me. It's about our child, too." Ethan reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know, and I want to be the kind of father and partner that you both deserve." But rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy. Julia had been hurt deeply, and Ethan knew that one day of support couldn't erase years of absence. There were moments of tension, old arguments resurfacing, reminders of the past and Julia's natural wariness. Ethan had to learn patience, humility, and consistency. He began small, running errands, cooking meals, helping with chores, and simply being present without expectation. Slowly, Julia began to let him in, not fully, not yet, but enough to see that Ethan's intentions were genuine. She observed his dedication, the way he quietly stepped back to allow her independence, the way he listened without interrupting, the way he celebrated small victories rather than demanding attention. And as the days passed, Ethan found that his obsession with wealth, power, and status began to fade. He realized that the richest moments in life weren't measured by money, but by connection, by love, by the chance to witness life and care for someone deeply. Yet, despite these small victories, challenges remained. Past wounds lingered, insecurities whispered in the quiet moments, and both had to confront the reality that love alone couldn't erase the pain of years apart. But the spark of hope, fragile yet persistent, had been reignited, a promise that perhaps together they could rewrite the story that had once ended so painfully. Weeks passed, and Ethan continued to show up in small, meaningful ways. He didn't overwhelm Julia. He didn't try to control her life. Instead, he supported her in ways that mattered, helping with heavy grocery bags, arranging medical checkups, and even spending quiet evenings preparing simple meals for her and the baby. Yet, despite all his efforts, the past refused to stay buried. Julia's friends and family, protective and cautious, watched Ethan's every move. They warned her, "Be careful. He's rich. He can charm anyone. Don't let him hurt you again." At first, Julia resisted these warnings, but doubts crept in. Could she trust him? Could she risk being hurt again, especially now with a child on the way? Ethan sensed her hesitation, and rather than arguing, he let his actions speak. One rainy evening, as Julia struggled to carry boxes from her small apartment to the cafe, Ethan appeared unexpectedly. Without a word, he helped her, carrying the heaviest box and offering a hand when she stumbled. She looked at him, her eyes softening, and for a moment, the tension of months melted away. But life had more challenges waiting. One afternoon, a former business rival of Ethan's discovered the news of Julia's pregnancy and her work at the cafe. Determined to stir trouble and distract Ethan, this rival spread rumors, insinuating that Julia was exploiting Ethan for money. Julia heard whispers from neighbors and customers, their questions and sly comments leaving her frustrated and embarrassed. She confronted Ethan one evening, her eyes flashing with anger and hurt. "Why is this happening? Why do people think I'm using you?" Ethan took her hands gently. "Julia, I don't care what anyone thinks. I know the truth. I know your heart. And I would never let anyone speak for me about us. You are not using me. You are surviving, and I admire that more than you can imagine." Her anger softened into tears, not just of frustration, but of relief. For the first time, she realized that Ethan's presence wasn't conditional on appearances or opinions. He genuinely wanted to be part of their lives, no strings attached. They faced more challenges over the next weeks: medical emergencies, sleepless nights, and the constant balancing act of Ethan's busy career and Julia's responsibilities. Yet, in the midst of chaos, small moments of joy and tenderness appeared. Ethan would read to Julia at night, his voice calm and steady, making her laugh with stories of his awkward childhood. They would take quiet walks, talking about the future, the baby, and their hopes. Slowly, they began to rebuild trust, brick by brick. One particular evening, as they walked home from the café, Julia paused and looked at Ethan. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were," she admitted. "Maybe we can only move forward in a new way." Ethan nodded. "I don't want the past. I want now, and I want us, however that looks. I don't care if it takes time. I'm not going anywhere." And so, a fragile but growing bond took hold. Love, once lost, now began to reshape itself around trust, patience, and mutual respect. Yet, as they would soon discover, life wasn't done testing them. Sometimes love requires more than forgiveness. It demands courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to face the unexpected together. One morning, Ethan received a call that shook him to the core. One of his companies was facing a sudden financial crisis. A deal had fallen through and rumors of bankruptcy were spreading. Investors were panicking, media outlets were speculating, and the empire he had spent decades building was suddenly under threat. Ethan had faced challenges before, but this time it felt different. He was no longer just thinking about himself. He had Julia and their unborn child to consider. The pressure weighed on him in a way it never had. Meanwhile, Julia was busy at the cafe, unaware of the storm brewing in Ethan's world. She noticed he seemed distracted during their morning coffee, his usual confident demeanor replaced with worry. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. He hesitated but knew he couldn't hide it from her. "Something happened with my company. It's serious. I might lose a lot, and I don't want it to affect you or the baby." Julia studied him carefully. She had always known Ethan to be strong, unshakable, but now he looked vulnerable, human in a way she hadn't seen in years. "We'll face it together," she said firmly. "Whatever happens, you're not alone, and neither am I. We'll figure this out." Her words surprised him. They were simple, yet they carried a strength he had underestimated. He realized that while he had wealth, power, and connections, it was her unwavering support that gave him the courage to face the crisis. The next few days were intense. Ethan worked tirelessly, negotiating with partners, managing the media, and attempting to salvage what he could. Julia stayed close, offering practical help, organizing paperwork, managing small tasks, and keeping their home life calm for both of them. During this period, their bond deepened. The old barriers fell away as they relied on each other in ways they never had before. Ethan saw her resilience firsthand, and Julia witnessed his commitment not to wealth or ego but to family. Then came the most unexpected turn. One evening, as they were reviewing documents together, Julia suddenly doubled over in pain. Panic surged through Ethan. "Julia, what's wrong?" I think the baby," she gasped, fear flashing across her face. Ethan grabbed his phone and rushed her to the hospital. Hours of anxiety and uncertainty followed, but finally the doctor reassured them. It was a scare, not an emergency. Relief washed over them, mingled with gratitude. That night, as they sat together in silence, Ethan held Julia's hand tightly. "I don't care about anything else in my life," he whispered. "All that matters is you and our child. I'll protect you both, no matter what." Julia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I believe you," she said softly, and in that moment, the distance of years dissolved. They weren't just reconnecting, they were building something new, forged through trials, fear, and mutual respect. But life wasn't done testing them yet. Outside pressures, unforeseen challenges, and the weight of past mistakes loomed on the horizon. Their journey was far from over, yet for the first time, Ethan and Julia felt that together they could face whatever came next. Months passed. Ethan and Julia had grown closer than ever. The bond forged through shared trials had turned into a deep, abiding trust. Ethan had learned patience, humility, and the quiet strength of being present, while Julia had learned to accept support without feeling that it diminished her independence. Together, they created a fragile but beautiful balance, one built on respect, understanding, and genuine love. The day of Julia's labor arrived. Ethan stayed by her side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement, and marveling at the strength and courage of the woman he had once taken for granted. The hours were long and exhausting, but neither of them complained. Each moment was a testament to how far they had come, from lost love and regret to hope and shared purpose. Finally, after a grueling night, the cries of a newborn filled the room. Julia looked exhausted but radiant, tears streaming down her face. Ethan's eyes brimmed with emotion as he saw the tiny life they had created together. It's perfect," he whispered, his voice breaking. The doctor placed the baby in Julia's arms. A healthy, smiling little boy with Ethan's eyes and Julia's delicate features gazed up at them. In that instant, all the hardships, all the mistakes, and all the pain of the past years seemed to fade. They had survived, and now they had a new beginning. Ethan gently took the baby in his arms, marveling at the tiny fingers and soft skin. "We did it," he said softly, looking at Julia. "We really did it." Julia smiled, leaning against him, feeling the warmth and security she had longed for. Yes, together. In the weeks that followed, their life settled into a new rhythm. Ethan took a step back from the constant pressures of business, choosing instead to focus on what truly mattered: family, love, and presence. Julia continued her work at the café, proud of her independence, but now with Ethan supporting her in every way. They faced challenges, of course, sleepless nights, balancing responsibilities, and the ever-present pressures of life, but they faced them as a team. One quiet evening, Ethan and Julia sat on a park bench, watching their son laugh and play. Ethan wrapped an arm around Julia, feeling a deep gratitude he had never known before. "I used to think success was everything," he said quietly, "but now I know. It's this. It's you. It's him. It's us." Julia rested her head on his shoulder, smiling.
"We've come a long way," she whispered, "and we're just beginning." And so, what began as a painful separation had transformed into a story of redemption, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. Ethan had learned that wealth meant nothing without connection. Julia had discovered that accepting support did not diminish her strength, and together they had created a life built on trust, respect, and unwavering devotion. In the end, the millionaire's greatest fortune wasn't measured in dollars or possessions. It was measured in love, family, and the promise of a future rebuilt from the fragments of the past. And as they watched their child sleep peacefully, both Ethan and Julia knew without doubt that everything had changed for the better forever.